This is actually you got a revised syllabus this year, so we are doing some more refining in it, and very soon, probably immediately after Christmas, next week, the complete syllabus textbook will be available for us. So I'll be giving you the hard copy as well as a hard copy, because soft copy going through the entire book may not be possible for you. It may be difficult. So I'll be giving you the hard copy, the textbook, as soon as it is printed. Okay, we'll see. So we were discussing about the spontaneous generation theory. Spontaneous means continuous, without a precursor, without its mother. So if something is coming spontaneously, if something is produced, see, some scientists, like in the beginning, Aristotle, 384 BC to he was 322 BC, he used to believe that life derives or originates from the non-living organisms or non-living matter. So he proposed what you call spontaneous generation theory. Life generates spontaneously without a precursor. Is it true?
No, sir.
No, it is scientifically, it is not true. Scientifically, it is not true. That's what it was disproved by several scientists. So there is a one more scientist, Virgil. He also proposed that there's many scientists at that time, actually BC scientists, many people they used to propose that before Christ, many people have believed that life derives from the non-living organisms, non-living matter, that is dead and decaying litter matter. From there, the life derives. And see, it is first Francis Reddy. It is in 1626 to 1697. He was surviving. He has first opposed spontaneous generation theory. He is the first person to oppose that spontaneous generation theory. What he did is he took the meat. See, if you can see this image, even I got the presentation, but see, okay, it is not. I'll explain you. He took a piece of meat and kept it in a flask, which is open, and another flask he took with a meat of he boiled that meat and closed it with a cork. Okay, closed it with a cork so that no air and no flies, nothing will be entering into it. And third flask, he took a third flask with a meat he took and added some water and boiled it. And see, he has covered the cover of the flask with a cloth. He has covered it with a cloth. And see, whenever you are boiling the water, moisture will come out and it will be trapped in the cloth, which is kept on the top, which is covered on the top. Okay, so one is empty flask, this open flask. He has taken the meat, and the second one, he has taken the meat and boiled and closed it with the lid. Third one, that is, so you can see three images are there here. One, this is the open one, and this is the closed one with a lid over there. Third, it is covered with the cloth. It is covered with the cloth. And here, what happens here, when you are covering with the cloth, the moisture which is evaporated, that will come and that will be trapped by the cloth. So what happened? The one which is kept open, got putrefied. You know putrefaction? What do you mean by putrefaction? Dead and decomposing of organic matter is called as putrefaction. Like simply making macromolecules into micromolecules. Breakdown of macromolecules. There is whatever the meat is there. Breakdown of that meat into smaller pieces. That is called as putrefaction. That happens by microorganisms. That was observed. So he said that. So that is the one. And second one, as it is sealed, you have heated that lob of meat, and it has been sealed with a lid. So no air has entered into it. So your meat is intact, maintained. No putrefaction has occurred. Whereas in third flask, what happened? There is no contamination, there is no putrefaction of meat inside, but on the cloth, you can see some maggots flowing, some maggots moving. You know what are the maggots? The larval forms of flies, some creeping small and butterfly kind of butterfly caterpillar kind of things. They are called as maggots. So maggots, see why these maggots have come? Because the meat has evaporated and it has trapped in the cloth over there. So some flies were attracted to it. Flies have fallen on it and they have laid the eggs. And because of these eggs which are laid over there, they have hatched and they have come up in the form of maggots. So he disproved that, see, in case of first thing, the air is entering into it, and the air carries some microorganisms, and that microorganisms are responsible for putrefaction of the flask. Whereas second flask, which is covered by lid, no, it is not allowing the entry of microorganisms inside. So it is not entering out from outside, it is not growing over there, and putrefaction does not take place. In third case, the cloth is having the maggots. The cloth is having the maggots because flies have fallen on it. Flies have they have laid the eggs on that one, and it has led into the growth of flies. So he proposed that it is Francis Reddy. He has proposed that it is the life cannot be formed from the non-living organisms. It should be come from the ancestors only. It should come from the parental living organisms. Otherwise, life cannot be formed by its own. And actually Francis Reddy is the first scientist to disprove the spontaneous generation theory. But you know, science develops with counter statements. If somebody says X statement, then the other person is ready with a Y statement. So to disprove the Francis Reddy's experiment, it is John Needham then. It is John Needham actually. John Needham is a scientist who disproved Reddy's experiment actually. He was the advocate of spontaneous generation theory. He is the person to promote spontaneous generation theory. And he said that you are interrupting the entry of the air inside. So air carries some living organisms. So vitality factor, he used the word vitality factor, or a factor which is required for life. You are removing something. You are removing some by putting some lid over there or cloth over there. You are disturbing the life to enter into it. So whatever the biogenesis theory is there, that is wrong. Biogenesis in the sense life comes from the life. Spontaneous generation in the sense life comes from non-life. So Aristotle, Virgil, they have recommended for this spontaneous generation theory, and it is Francis Reddy, by taking the flask meat and flask experiment, he has disproved spontaneous generation theory. But again, Needham, he proposed that you are preventing the entry of pure air. You are preventing the entry of pure air. That's what. That's what. It is not a natural air that is entering. So your biogenesis theory is wrong. Then another scientist, Lazzaro Spallanzani. Lazzaro Spallanzani in 1765, he has boiled the beef lob, the meat, whatever the Reddy's experiment he has done. He has heated for 1 hour completely and sealed in a flask, and that he found that the heating process is removing the oxygen completely from the flask. It is removing completely oxygen from the flask, and he is telling that, you tell me how can organisms will survive in the absence of oxygen? If you are heating for 1 hour continuously, then what happens? Oxygen, there is a common process. Oxygen will be going out whenever you are heating for such a long period. So oxygen is lost outside, and that will be leading into the loss of life. That's what life is not growing. So your biogenesis theory is wrong. And two scientists, it is Schultz and Schwann. I told you, science develops with statement and counter statements. First, Aristotle and many olden days people used to believe that it is a spontaneous generation theory is right. Then Reddy has first given experimental proof that spontaneous generation is wrong and biogenesis is right. Then subsequently, it is Needham. He said that no, you are interrupting the entry of the pure air, so life is not growing. And Splanchani, he boiled the meat for 1 hour continuously, and he proved that there is no oxygen inside. There is no oxygen inside, so that life is not formed. So Schultz and Schwann, it is in 1850 and 1820 to 1850. These two scientists individually they worked. They want to disprove that whatever the Splanchani's concept is there is wrong. Splanchani, what he did, he took a meat in a flask, in a beaker, and boiled for a 1 hour process, 1 hour continuously. After 1 hour, he said that whatever the oxygen is there inside the flask, that goes out. So how can you expect the growth of living organism inside? That was his concept. To disprove that one, our two scientists, Schultz and Schwann. Schultz, what he did, see, he took, like, he didn't boiled the meat lobe. Initially, he sterilized and he allowed it to cool. Then he passed the air, the atmospheric air he passed through the acid. See, the air is being passed through a tube. In the tube, he has kept the acid. So whatever that air is being passed, that has to pass through the acid. So if any microorganism is there in the air, that has to pass through the acid. And if any microorganism that passes through the microorganism, it gets killed. Simple. It gets killed. And the other scientist, the Schwann, what he did, Schwann, he is passing the air through a tube, but the tube is hot copper rod tube. Even if you are passing the air through the hot copper tube, what happens, because of the high temperature, it is hot, and the bacteria, that is passing through the hot tube, what is going to happen? Your bacteria is going to be killed over there. So these two scientists, actually, Splanchani, what he said, you are completely eliminating the oxygen over there. That's what the bacteria is not growing, or living organisms are not growing. To disprove this thing, this Schultz and Schwann, they have passed the air, they have passed the oxygen, but Schultz treated with acid. So your air is being passed through the acid. So what air is being partially filtered. So if something is there in air, that will be trapped with the acid, and Schwann passed it through the hot copper tubes. So in both the cases, if at all the microorganisms are there, they will be killed. But again, scientists don't believe as such. So scientists, they said that no, we are not convinced. You are treating with acid and you are treating with hot air, hot copper. So the natural property of oxygen is being lost. Oxygen you are passing. Splanchani, what he said, you are disturbing the oxygen. You are eliminating the oxygen from the broth, from the flask. That's what the growth is not taking place. To disprove that one, there's Schultz and Schwann. They have passed through the acid and copper hot tubes. But again, these fellows, they are telling that no. Hot acid treatment and hot copper tube treatment is disturbing the natural there is oxygen. That's what it is not having the capacity to do the spontaneous generation. And again, they don't believe it. Then it is Schroeder and Dusch, the two scientists. Schroeder and Dusch, actually, these two scientists, it is in 1850. They have kept a cotton plug. They took a cotton plug and applied over the flask. They took a meat inside and along with the water, and they have boiled. While boiling itself, they have kept a plug, cotton plug, and this cotton plug is microporous. Means small holes it will be having. You know, cotton, you take the cotton cloth, definitely there will be having some holes. You take multi layers of cotton, still it is having the holes. So air can pass through it, but air can pass through it, but any particulate matter that is passing through the air, that cannot be passed, and that will be filtered. Hope you understood. And this is the phenomena what we are using for our regular microbiology work. This is the phenomena where we'll be preparing cotton plugs, and we'll be sealing our there's a microbiological test tubes, flask, all these things. Okay, so what he did, he took the meat lobe in a flask and along with the water, and plugged it with the cotton. He took cotton and plugged it, and after plugging, he has boiled it and kept aside for some time, and there was no growth observed. And he said that, see, due to heat, whatever the microbes are there along with the meat, they got killed. And still, I am permitting the air to enter into it. Oxygen is entering, but no microbes have been grown there. So spontaneous generation theory is wrong. Spontaneous generation theory is wrong, and biogenesis theory is right. Okay, but still, see, it is 1859. Pouchet is a Pouchet. He has stated that no. Again, see, you are interfering the life forming thing. It is not. You should not do anything. You should leave it free. Free flow of air should be there to permit the organisms to grow. There should be a free flow of air. It should not be interrupted with anything. This was proposed by the Pouchet. And finally, our father of microbiology has entered. That's Louis Pasteur, to give a full stop to this spontaneous generation theory. So what he did, like the basic concept, see, Louis Pasteur thought that living organisms means they must be having some entity. Listen properly. Living organisms must be having some particulate nature. There must be some entity. So if any entity or particulate matter will be denser than that of air, basic fundamental. If anything is particulate in nature or entity, it will be denser or more weightier than that of air. Isn't it? Simply. So he has developed a flask which is called as swan-necked flask or goose-necked flask. See, this is the image. I'll give you, don't worry. See, this is a goose-necked flask. It is coming like this. So same thing what the earlier people did, he did the same thing. He took the meat lobe here in the flask, and he has boiled enough so that steam will be developed, and whatever it will be going out, some extent the steam will be going out from it, and he has kept it aside, and no growth was observed. No growth was observed. See what happens here. In fact, he has kept a plug also in the beginning, but scientists like Brochet and other people, they said that no, again you are disturbing. So this, you see the neck, swan neck, if any air passes through it, the air passing through it, so what happened? The denser particles like microorganisms will be settling down here. They will be settling down here, and only the air will be entering into this. Sterile air will be entering into this one. It will be sterile air will be entering into this one. So he has not filtered. He has not filtered through acid. He has not filtered through copper tubes. He has not filtered through the cotton. just based on the density separation, because this bacteria are denser than the air, they will be settling down. Simple concept he has used. That is the uniqueness of science actually. So he found that the bacteria got settled, and rest of air, pure air, or we call it as a sterile air, that will enter into the flask, and because of the pure air is going, no microbes are entering into that one. Microbial growth does not takes place. Microbial growth does not takes place over there. Okay, and see, this was actually, with this one, the spontaneous generation theory has been completely stopped. It is proved that biogenesis is right by Louis Pasteur. Because of this contribution, Louis Pasteur was, in fact, he has given too many contributions to microbiology. But this is the main to call him as a father of microbiology. Here, in this case, actually, this works fine if you are taking a juice. He actually, Louis Pasteur is a scientist. Actually, he's a chemist. He was a doctor also. He was a wine tester. He was in his town. He used to taste the wine quality. See, if you take the wine or fruit pulp, if you are taking the fruit pulp into a gooseneck flask, and if you are heating for some time or boiling for some time, then you will not be able to see any microbial growth, because anyhow the entry is not at all taking place. But the other observation, see, up to here the spontaneous generation theory ends. Okay, from here we'll be taking it to some other points. So some other scientists, what they observed, see, Louis Pasteur, what he observed, you take some material, like actually he didn't work with meat, but he worked with fruit juices. He worked with fruit juices. But some other scientists, when they started working with this meat lobe or some other material, see, initially there was no growth for 1 day or one and a half day, but subsequently growth was observed. Growth was observed. So this, when they observed the liquid grown bacteria under the microscope, it was observed like a round resistant structures, and they are called as endospores. They are called as endospores. Actually, what happens here? Fruit pulp will be having mostly there's the bacteria which are growing on the top of the surface of the fruits, isn't it? And mostly gram-negative, gram-positive bacteria. The actively growing bacteria can be easily killed. Actively, just heating at 100 degrees, boiling is 100 degrees Celsius is quite enough to kill your vegetative bacteria. Whereas spore formers are resistant bacteria. They are the resistant bacteria, so they cannot be easily they cannot be killed. So Louis Pasteur actually introduced the concept of sterilization, but unfortunately, because he was not aware about spores at the time, he was not aware about the spores, but like he could not able to explain in some cases, even though the microorganisms are growing. That is because of the endospores. Then there is another scientist, Tyndall. There is another scientist called as Tyndall. He has further given a conclusion to this one. See, if there are spores, you first heat there's a gooseneck flask for some time, and boil it for some time, then incubate at room temperature 1 day, and second day again. See what happens here. If you are after boiling, vegetative cells will be killed, and when you are allowing at room temperature, whatever the spores are there, they will germinate, and second day when you are heating, those the endospores which got germinated, they also gets killed. So third day again, what happened? You are incubating. So what happened? If any some spores will germinate very slow. All the spores will not germinate at a time. So the spores which got germinated late, they will also can be killed in third day heating. So 3 days consequent boiling followed by incubation at room temperature is called as tyndallization. Tyndall has developed this process. That's what it is called as tyndallization. Okay. This is how that germ theory of spontaneous generation theory has been disproved. This is one important theory. And the second theory is Koch postulates. Robert Koch is one of the very prominent and very popular medical microbiologist, but he's the father of medical microbiology. So actually, he has Louis Pasteur has worked on several things, several aspects, but this Robert Koch has worked more of technical aspect of microbiology. He did more contributions. Contributions we'll discuss later. Now we'll discuss what you call Koch postulates. See, Koch has, by his observations, he worked on anthrax, Bacillus anthracis. He worked on Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Anthrax causes the anthracis, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis causes the TB, tuberculosis. And so even he was happened to work with cholera, Vibrio cholera, which is a dangerous organism. So he was the first scientist to isolate a pure culture, and he was the first scientist to have a pure there is a solid media, and he was the first scientist to develop staining techniques. He has developed a technique for even Mycobacterium staining also, which was a very tough job actually. Okay, so he has laid from his research, whatever the findings are there, still they are the golden rules for the medical microbiology work. As I told you, germs. The people used to think that microbes, in the sense, only the disease causing and which disturbs our life. And it is Robert Koch's work helped to understand its disease pattern. So the Robert Koch, his observations, we can call them as observation, or the rules were very popular. Even today also they are very popular, and that's what we name them as a Koch postulates. Koch postulates. So what are those Koch postulates? Like Mendel's rules are there, Mendel laws are there. Like the same thing, we have Koch postulates. What are those Koch postulates? Can anybody tell us what are the Koch postulates? Okay, before going to the Koch postulates, we'll see some background. Germ theory of disease. Actually, germs are responsible for causing the disease. Okay, and see, it is this contagious, the concept of contagious during the olden days, whenever the smallpox happens in a particular area or in a particular emperor, what they used to do, if somebody got killed with smallpox, they used to cover him in a blanket and throw him in the enemy's territory. And they know that the disease is caused by the germs, some germs. And these germs, if you throw that person somewhere, and these germs are having a capacity to cause the disease, and they use the term germ, they were using the term germs, and the term they are using contagious, and the disease contagious disease. They knows that it is caused by the germs, and it is these germs are contagious, means they are transmittable. They are transmittable from one person to, they gets transmission from one person to other person. The disease gets spread from one person to other person. And that's what actually this is the concept of bioterrorism. Terrorist activity they are doing with living organisms. Okay, many, even it is being practiced several countries, so Indochina and Indo-Pakistan, influenza virus. If you just spread the influenza virus, the person will not kill, but he will become weak. Adenovirus. and many such kind of things are there. And it is believed that corona is also one of the outcome of terrorism. Many people says many of these concepts. So okay, so Robert Koch was working on anthrax, and you know what is this anthrax? It is the animal disease. Actually, even it causes a human being also. In fact, there was a big in 2001, 2003. It was a like during Clinton's period. Like the people used to get postal envelopes with some powdery kind of thing, and that powder contains the spores of this Bacillus anthracis, and this Bacillus anthracis actually see whoever cattle, goats, and the sheep, whoever are grazing these animals, this bacteria will be growing in them. So it will be coming in contact with the skin, and if it will be making the blisters on the skin. But it's not fatal. That's much fatal if it is a skin. But if you have inhaled it, it will go in your lungs, and it will grow in the lungs also, and it causes asphyxia, means lack of oxygen, and the person will die. It is a very fatal. It's very dangerous. This anthrax. So basically, this anthracis comes in cattle, grazing animals, especially like sheep, even this buffaloes and cows also. So this Bacillus anthracis, he was working on there is at that time mouse was not there, not available. So he was working on the rat, normal our brown color rat, which is there in our kitchen yard or somewhere else. So he was working on that one. So when he has injected this Bacillus anthracis through the nose, through the water, or through sprinklings, it goes inside and it causes the infection in the lungs, and as well as in blood also. It causes the blood as well as lung infections. So when he has taken out the blood from that mouse which got killed by the anthracis, he has taken out the blood, and he has injected into the other healthy mouse. Then other healthy mouse also got symptoms, and it got a disease and it got killed. And during the first time when he drawn the blood from the first mouse, he has, I told you, Robert Koch is a scientist who has developed solid media, and he is the scientist who has introduced the concept of pure cultures. So he has plated it, he has streaked it on the mutant agar plate, or some nutrition plate. So he found that the bacteria, Bacillus anthracis bacteria, is growing on the plate. And then what he did, he took the bacteria which is grown in that plate and emulsified it in water, mixed it with water, and injected into other mouse. There also it is causing the disease. See, just to recollect your Weizmann's experiment. Weizmann, he has removed the tails of the mice for several generations. Even this fellow, Robert Koch, he has first injected Bacillus anthracis into mouse, and here it has developed pneumonia, and got the blood from that mouse and injected into the fresh mouse that got disease and got killed. And he has drained, he has collected the blood from that one. Continuously, he has gone up to 20-21 generations. So he found that till the last generation, still the disease is there. That is the one observation. That is the one observation he has made. See, always postulates or theories are made based on the experiments. First, you should understand what he did, what are his experiments. Then you should interpret from his experiments, you should interpret how he got the theories or postulates. So second observation. First observation is he got that anthrax causing bacteria, Bacillus anthracis, and injected into the mouse by taking it in water through nasal sprays. And it got injected, and so that mouse got, not actually we should not use the word mouse here. It is a rat, because at that time we don't have a concept of mouse, white mouse that we are working nowadays. So it got pneumonia. So pus was formed in there's lungs as well as blood, and he has taken out the blood and injected into other mouse. Like subsequently, he has gone. All the mouses got killed. Second observation: from the mouse which got diseased, means wherever there is a pus, he has taken out the blood sample and he has applied to the nutrient media, and he found that the bacteria is growing. Wherever he has taken out the bacteria, that is able to able to grow on the nutrient plate. That is the second observation. Third observation: whatever the bacteria growing on the solid plate, that he has taken again and suspended in water and injected into other mouse, the healthy mouse, and there also it got diseased with pneumonia, and you can see the similar pus or the bacteria growing in the blood. And this is fourth observation. Then he took the blood from that mouse and again streaked on the plate, that got again what? Growth. Okay, let's summarize what he did. There should be a causative agent always. There should be a same causative agent to cause a disease. This is his first statement. See, suppose a person is suffering with malaria. So always malaria causative plasmodium should be there in a person. I hope everybody will accept with this one. Okay. So if a particular disease is there, then its causative agent must be there in a host. That is the first statement. Actually, the limitations we'll discuss later. First, we'll complete the Koch postulates. Then we'll discuss about, there are certain limitations. See, each and every scientific observations will be having some limitations. But we will take the normal. If it follows 80% or above 80%, then we'll consider it as a theorem or postulate. That is the first observation. To a particular disease, there should be a causative agent always present in that host. That's one. Second thing, always, see, it should be either 21st generation. It could be a 21st generation. This anthracis bacteria must be there if you want this disease, anthracis disease, to be coming to that rat. Always it should be there. That's the most important thing. Second thing, this whenever you are having a disease condition into a host, whenever you are a disease, like if you are having a typhoid, or if you are having a malaria, or if you are having anthracis, or if you are having a disease, you can isolate the bacteria. You can culture the bacteria in the laboratory, and you can isolate the pure culture. If the rat is suffering with anthracis, you can isolate the bacteria which is capable of causing the disease. So we can grow that bacteria in the laboratory conditions. We can grow the bacteria in the laboratory conditions. Can we grow? Yeah, majority of the bacteria. Like this, there are a few exceptions that I will discuss in the limitations. So we should be able to grow. That is second statement. First postulate is always there should be a causative agent in a diseased condition. Always there should be a diseased condition, disease causing microorganisms in a diseased condition. Well said. Second statement, whenever there is a disease causing microorganism in a diseased person or a rat, that microorganism can be cultured in the laboratory conditions and pure culture can be obtained. So this is second statement. Third statement, these isolated bacteria, whatever the pure culture, the culture which microorganism that is taken out from the living organism and grown in the laboratory, when you inject again into the host, still it is capable of causing the disease. That is the third statement. When you take out whatever the bacteria that is grown in the laboratory conditions, when you grow the bacteria in the laboratory conditions, and if you re-inject it into bacteria, the host, if you re-inoculate into the, or if you inoculate into the host, still it is capable of causing the disease. Very simple, very easy concept. There is nothing. That is third point. Then fourth point, again, you will be able to re-isolate second time infected, whatever the mouse and rabbit is there, or whatever the man is there, or any organism is there. From that one, the disease causing microorganisms can be again isolated on solid agar or in the laboratory conditions. These are the four Koch postulates. Still today, this stands golden milestones for medical microbiology. Still, there are some exceptions, some limitations. Obviously, all will be having. First, I will explain you again what are the Koch postulates. Then we'll go to the limitations. Always, in a particular disease, its causative agent must be there in a host. First point. Second point, in a particular disease, its causative agent can be grown in the laboratory and can be obtained in pure culture form. Third point, these grown microorganism in the laboratory conditions, if you infect to the healthy host, again it is capable of causing the disease. Fourth point, this reinfected host, the healthy host which got disease, from there again, if you collect the blood and if you try for the isolation of culturing of bacteria, there you can isolate the bacteria. This is simple. Koch postulates. Now we'll see the limitations of Koch postulates. First statement is, he said that always for one particular disease, one causative agent must be there and it should be there always. Okay. So, but there are certain cases, nephritis is there. Nephritis, different type of bacteria also causes nephritis. Pneumonia, different types of bacteria, Streptococcus pneumonias, Diplococcus pneumonia, and many even virus, influenza, they causes pneumonia. But this is acceptable. But see, maybe minute level with bacterial pneumonia and viral pneumonia, adenovirus pneumonia, influenza pneumonia, minute level we will be able to differentiate. But see, on a broader level, if you think, both are pneumonias, both are nephritis, and sometimes the diseases may not be microbial. Nephritis maybe because of high blood sugar, or maybe due to kidney damage or injury, that may be happened. So that was the limitation of first, but that can be understood. Second one is that the bacteria or microorganisms can be grown in the laboratory conditions. See, now viruses also can be grown, but not on media. You require some, its host is required. Viruses, chlamydia, rickettsia, their growing is not so easy. But now, see, with improved technology, we are growing them in appropriate cell lines. See, the corona cell line, this coronavirus is being grown in the laboratory conditions also, but you require cell lines. And third statement, when you reinfect, when you, whatever the culture grown is there, the bacteria which is grown in the laboratory conditions, when you reinfect to the host, it should be in a position to cause the disease. You know, actually, if you keep the bacteria in unfavorable conditions, if you keep the bacteria in unfavorable conditions, it will lose its efficiency to cause the disease. That's a property of causing the disease called as virulence. This virulence is lost. Some bacteria will lose the virulence. So this phenomena will not work in that case. Actually, that is a concept of developing vaccines. First, there's a poultry vaccine was developed by using this concept. There's a poultry typhoid vaccine was developed based on this one. So, but normally, if you in the same conditions without destroying the host organisms conditions, normally it will retain its virulence. Okay, this is about Koch postulates, and today we discussed two concepts. That is spontaneous generation theory and Koch postulates. I'll be happy to have any quick questions so that I can answer. And one day, like a 2 hours class, I can wind up the contributions of scientists. The different scientist contributions are there that I can wind up in one class. So if you can have any queries, I'll be happy to answer.
Sir,
Yeah, please.
who proposed the biogenesis?
Huh?
Who proposed the biogenesis theory first time?
It is Francis Reddy. It is Francis Reddy with experimental. He is the first person to propose the biogenesis theory, and later on, the scientists again they started countering him. But finally, that spontaneous generation theory is completely disproved, and biogenesis was completely accepted after the work of Louis Pasteur. So actually,